have a very special guest that I enjoy a lot. This is William Bonnell. I originally met William through another group, another real estate group online, and um, I've been I've been entertained and also educated by his content for a while now. And we'll see how many tangents we end up on today. But he has very strong opinions, and I always get a lot out of it. But William, why don't you take a second, maybe give the I don't know 30-second version of kind of who you are and what you do.
Absolutely. I'm William Bonnell. I'm originally from the Boston area. I've been a real estate investor since the year 2000, so 23 years at this point in time. It is the only thing that I've ever been actually good at doing in terms of professionally for an income. I lucked out in the fact that I was unemployable from birth. So that kind of blessed me, and it forced me to become an entrepreneur and an investor because I couldn't have a job because I'm not capable of having people tell me what to do. You know what I mean? That just doesn't work. Somebody tells me what to do, I'm not very motivated to do that thing. I instead just want to knock them out. So that drove me to find ways to carry my own weight through life and to simply take on life from a purely responsible perspective and find my own way through,
Okay. And so where are you at now as far as your investing journey, and kind of, and then we can maybe kind of backtrack to, how you kind of got started down that, and what the beginning of your like real estate investor life was like.
Oh, absolutely. So initially, I got into this actually slightly before turning 18. I was still technically 17 years old the first time I signed a real estate contract. I had worked as a teenager, I had worked in various construction trades, mostly just labor. I wasn't really skilled labor because I was still a teenager and hadn't really learned anything. So I was just hauling shit around and whatever. And I ended up, as a result of that, meeting some people that were real estate investors. And I was looking at their life, and these guys in particular were in their 20s, and I was 17 years old. And I'm looking at the way their life appeared to be at 23, 24. They're driving around in convertible BMWs and shit like that, wearing nice clothes, nice watch. Looks like their life doesn't suck. Meanwhile, I had plaster hardening in my pockets. So I was just kind of like, I want to do what he does, not what I'm doing. So initially, I got into both investing and the agent side of the business at the same time. Turns out I really sucked at being a salesperson, because you can't be a very strongly opinionated person and still be in sales and expect that to work out well. Usually doesn't. So I talked more people out of buying houses in my first year as a licensed realtor. And I got like shit canned from every brokerage that I touched until I opened my own and used it only for investment purposes. But yeah. So I discovered that I really enjoy investing. I really enjoy real estate. I enjoy the versatility of real estate as an investment, because as a tangible investment, there's just so much you can do with it. There's so many different ways to monetize real estate, and there's so many industries that revolve around it,
And so what year was it you opened your own brokerage?
I opened my own brokerage in 2003.
Okay. And so then I would assume, because I know later on you got into short sales and stuff, so I would assume that you did the brokerage investor side for probably, I don't know, 5-ish years until like maybe the short sale stuff kind of emerged, or did you start doing short sale stuff before that?
Well, when I first got into real estate, one of the things that I was, much like many people are, one of the things that I was originally introduced to right off the bat was actually pre-foreclosures as a lead source. One of the guys that I had originally learned from had recently come home from the Marines and gotten into fixing and flipping and doing a couple of other things along those lines. He used to do something similar with cars as well. And I learned a bunch of stuff from that guy. And one of the things that I had initially learned was how to source leads from pre-foreclosure, because of the fact that obviously there's a strong motivation when somebody's on the verge of losing their property. They've got a strong motivation to sell it rather than have it forcefully taken from them, right? So I actually started off going after pre-foreclosure properties, both as an agent and an investor right from the beginning. So
Okay.
back in 2000, when I first got started, my original activity was actually knocking on doors of properties that were in pre-foreclosure. That was what I first originally started doing.
Okay. Now talk to me about that. There's there's ways definitely you don't want to enter to start that conversation when you knock on the door, and maybe
Mm.
some ways that are more effective. What's maybe the what's the best way you've done it, and maybe what's the worst way? I want to kind of hear how you kind of navigated that,
So
or did you get good coaching and get like that feedback right off the bat, or just figure it out?
there were a lot of aspects to that, and there are also a lot of ways to approach that, largely because of the fact that people have so many different personalities.
Hmm.
There are so many different personality types out there. There are some people where if you're not straight to the point and direct, you're losing your opportunity to talk to them because they immediately think you're full of shit.
Hmm.
But there are other people where if you are straight to the point and direct, they take it like a punch in the face, and all you're really trying to do is communicate factual information that should inspire a certain reaction or a response. And unfortunately, in some cases, it doesn't actually inspire that reaction or response. Instead, what it does is they get scared. So believe it or not, there are actually states and municipalities all over the country that have started to enact legislation to prohibit people from reaching out to people who are in pre-foreclosure based upon the fact that they are in pre-foreclosure in the first place, right? So there
Hmm.
are places where if you're a realtor, for example, you're not supposed to reach out to people in pre-foreclosure.
And we're
Now, what kind of
actually,
Yep,
and I apologize. I was going to say we're based out of Washington, which is one of those states. So a lot of the
yep.
people that will watch this video are dealing with that. So any specific things for
Oh,
that
absolutely.
audience would be great too.
Absolutely. So here's the thing. Any given motivation alone, most of the time, is not going to be a super strong selling point. So if somebody's got one motivating factor, let's say, like we're big fans of lead stacking. That's a big part of how we run our business. So I'll be going after something where that same property is in need of probate, or probate is already going on, and it's also in pre foreclosure, right? Those are some of the best deals out there right now, as a matter of fact, are probate pre-foreclosures.
Hmm.
In many cases nationwide, they're actually going to be a reverse mortgage that is recorded against that property, and it's going to be a reverse mortgage company that is foreclosing. In those cases, it's really unique. It's really, really unique. First and foremost, they're very regulated the way that they handle those. So it's nice and simple in
Hmm.
terms of exactly what the rules are. They're literally published right on HUD's website, Housing and Urban Development's website. You can look up, if you just Google reverse mortgage short sale, you're going to
Hmm.
end up pulling up a document fairly quickly, or reverse mortgage pre foreclosure sale, because they're not always a short sale. But if you look those up, you're going to find that the rules are clearly spelled out right on HUD's website. And it's one of the things that I love about pre foreclosures is that there are existing rules. So let me illustrate really quickly what I mean by that. It's the difference between, let's say I wanted to be physical today. I
Hmm.
could show up at some random public park and just run around like a maniac to break a sweat and to get some kind of physical activity to satisfy my physical needs, right? To take care of my body. But if I were to show up with maybe like a baseball and a bat and some gloves and some buddies, we'd have a little bit more of a structured idea of what to physically do in order to burn some calories, right?
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So instead of just running around like maniacs, we could simply take some well-known objects and play a well-established game that we all know the rules to, or at least have an idea of the rules. It's kind of the same thing with pre-foreclosures, because of the fact that I know there are certain legal boundaries and certain procedural boundaries of understanding how the banks work on the back end and how the government agencies work on the back end. Makes it a lot easier for me to consistently perform when I'm going after leads that originated from that source. So that's really the center of how I run my business, whether I'm doing commercial stuff or I'm doing fix and flips or I'm doing buy and hold. Doesn't matter what my long-term strategy is. My original lead source is coming from a public record, readily identifiable problem. So if I'm talking to a seller, I'm talking to a seller because of probate, or I'm talking to the seller because they're in a pre-foreclosure situation, or I'm talking to the seller because they have a massive federal tax lien recorded against the property they own. You know what I mean? But I'm targeting them because they have a specific problem that I specialize in resolving.
Okay. And so when you go and you are going to target or go to market to these people, are you using usually the direct mail, or are you having people door knock for you now?
We still do a lot of door knocking. We do
Okay.
phone calls and we do some direct mail. We also do some SEO type stuff. We do some
Okay.
outbound email marketing, outbound SMS marketing. There is, I basically any given medium is fine. Ultimately, the goal is just to build rapport with these homeowners. When a homeowner is highly distressed, the reality of the matter is it's not going to be like a lot of wholesalers are used to jumping on the phone and tying up a property under contract on that first phone call while they're on the phone, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they're chasing around doing the same shit as all the other wholesalers, chasing their tail, looking for a buyer and hoping they're going to make some money on the deal. I'm building rapport with the seller first. I'm establishing a relationship with the seller to such an extent that they're not going to go talk to anybody else. On top of
Mm-hmm.
which, many of the circumstances and situations that they're in, for example, when somebody is upside down by $250,000, and then on top of that, they also have a $250,000 IRS lien. That's the type of stuff that any other investor they call is going to walk away from it and have
Mm-hmm.
no idea what to do with it. So I love specializing in them because I never have to fight to protect my food. I don't deal with hyenas like most other real estate investors do. That's
Mm-hmm.
not an aspect of my life. I have literally a handful of times in my entire career of 23 years, a handful of times I've ever had somebody else try to go after a deal that I'm working on. And quite frankly, every single time that they've managed to steal a deal from me, they failed to close it. So I can literally state in 23 years, nobody's ever stolen a deal from me and successfully managed to actually get anything out of it.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
I like that. I like that. So did you start when you started the investing stuff, 0308, in that window, did you start buying multifamily at that point, or did you wait a little longer for that?
I started buying multifamily in 2002, late 2002 is when I
Okay.
started buying multifamily. I started buying some smaller stuff. I got some 3 units, 4 units, 6 units, 8 units between '03 and '05, '06.
Okay.
And then right around the middle of '06, I started going into larger apartment complexes.
Okay. And is all of that time, was it all in like the Boston area, or where? Um,
Mostly, but I did a lot of stuff I did a lot of stuff in Mass. I did a lot of stuff in New Hampshire, and then I started working my way down the East Coast, basically.
okay. And so as it sits today, have you held on to all of that, or do you sell out of the smaller ones and go into just
I've
bigger
sold
ones?
out of a lot of the smaller stuff and worked into bigger stuff. Basically, what I've done over the course of time is I've become more of a snob of what
Mhm.
I'm willing to deal with. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like initially, I was perfectly fine buying property in the worst neighborhoods that were available. And I didn't even care if I had to dodge bullets while I was collecting rent. I was still just so ecstatic to own property. I didn't care. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Um, I remember actually having tenants. I had several tenants in the third property I ever bought, which was a nightmare. It took me 2 years to get out from under that property when I
Mhm.
finally made the decision to get rid of it and quit on it. Um, that property, third property I ever bought, third income property I ever bought, I had a whole bunch of criminal assholes living in that property that were like dealing drugs and stealing stuff and fencing stuff and whatever the hell else. And they would try to intimidate me off of the property with their dogs. They had
Mhm.
Dobermans, Rottweilers, Pit Bulls, those types of more
Mhm.
intimidating breeds that, and they had, so this was a 4 unit property, and I think there were 8 or 9 dogs in the property, and all 4 units had essentially, before I acquired it, had been moved into by the same like little gang of people that
Mhm.
were into a bunch of illicit activity. I ended up buying it from the owner because she was a full-time nurse, had no time to deal with that shit, and certainly didn't have the temperament for it. um, and I mean, every single time I got that place cleared out, it got taken over again by squatters. All of my contractors, when we were remodeling it, they all lost all of their tools.
Oh, I hate that.
Everybody had like vandalism done to their vehicles while they were working on the project. It was just, An
Mhm.
absolute nightmare. It
Mhm.
was horrible. And the entire time the city was trying to find me for every last bit of it. I'm like, I'm actively trying to resolve this shit.
In which
Um,
city was that?
that particular one was in Lowell, Mass.
Okay. Like a suburb of Boston or something
Yeah,
like okay.
it's about 45 minutes north of Boston. It's actually, if you've ever heard of the movie The Fighter,
Yeah. Mhm.
that's where that's based out of. That's the
Okay.
city that movie was based out of.
Nice. Was that one was that Mark Wahlberg or no, who was that one? I don't remember.
Yeah, that was Wahlberg.
Yeah. Um, okay. And so where fast forward a bit, you've been kind of doing that shifting. You got the short sale side of your business that specialize in with that, and then
Mhm.
you provide that as a service for others, or do you just do that with deals that you're dealing with on your own?
So there was a short period of time, a very long time ago, where I would provide that as a service. I have a handful of individuals that I'll still handle short sales for. And
Hmm.
it's literally a handful just because of the relationship that they trust me and don't really trust me to hand it off to somebody else.
Hmm.
Um, but for the most part, I'm only doing short sales for my own stuff. I do have a trusted referral source that even within our own program, myself and my partner's program, when some of our students have deals that don't fit our buy box because of the fact that we're not going to negotiate stuff that we're not buying, we actually have an existing relationship with another third party that we can refer those deals to. So there are a
Okay.
lot of different aspects to short sales, you know.
Okay. And then I recall you also were doing maybe something similar with loan mods or doing something. Is that, do I remember that correctly? Were you doing that too?
Well, there's been a lot of cases where I use loan mods
Okay.
in my process of acquisition, but I'm not doing it immediately, and I'm not doing it at the exact same time. Like it's an ongoing multi-step process.
Okay.
So, um, a big portion of what I do involves subject to transactions and other creative transactions because there are a lot of different ways of utilizing creative transactions to solve problems. But my business model revolves entirely around solving problems. So I initially find people because I know they have at least one specific problem that I specialize in solving. They
Hmm.
oftentimes have other problems that tend to go hand in hand. Like, for example, if somebody's married and they're in pre foreclosure, there's a better than 50% chance that there is a divorce either already in the works or about to be. And
Hmm.
that's going to be a part of what I end up having to deal with as well, just from
Hmm.
experience, you know?
So walk me through I know every situation is different, but walk me through kind of the usual chain of events when you're going to be acquiring property, incorporating a loan mod into that.
So, if we're going to be doing that, first and foremost, we're going to make sure that that person is actually able to get a loan mod in their situation. So, we've got to evaluate it first. I'm always looking to get my upfront information. Much like your doctor, any given doctor would want blood work and x rays and
Mhm.
other such confirmatory tests done in order to make sure that they're going down the right path. When I first meet any given property owner that has a certain situation, so for example, let's say pre foreclosure happens to be the reason I'm talking to them because there was a Liz pendants filed that I became aware of. Or maybe it was a pre probate situation where somebody passed away. I traced the heirs. I looked into the property and I discovered, on top of the fact that it requires probate, it's also in pre foreclosure as part of my due diligence, right? That would be a case like Washington State, where you're not allowed to go after it because it's in pre foreclosure, but you can go after it for another uh, distressed reasons, such as probate, discover that it happens to be in pre foreclosure, and you can still work the deal. You simply can't target somebody for being in pre foreclosure and aggressively go after them.
Mhm.
So that's the intent behind those types of laws, and it's really backwards. It's backwards
Really?
as all
Oh my
hell,
god.
huh?
I agree with you wholeheartedly. It makes it harder for someone to sell their way out of a bad situation or to,
Yes,
you know
yes.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
the idea is that they make it, oftentimes lawmakers make it sound as though entrepreneurs are the enemy.
Mhm.
Okay. And the reason is because in order for their job to have any value whatsoever, in order for them to pretend that they somehow bring some value to the table, they need to be able to have a bad guy to point the finger at.
Mhm.
So when most people are poor and desperate because of the choices that they make every day and nothing else, it's the choices that they choose to make over and over and over again that result in their life sucking. When that's the case, They would much rather, lawmakers would much rather point at the billionaire that didn't pay enough taxes or whatever the hell else and blame it on that. It's not the fact that we're spending more money than we're taking in every year. It couldn't possibly be that. It's definitely something else.
Seriously, it was just today I saw something for Seattle, and they spent something like $65 million to remove 300 people from a tent camp area and like house them somewhere, right?
Mhm.
And it's like 300. That's the math on that seems high. Like, you know, right? Like, it's what do you do? How do you understand how it happens? But it's all about pandering for votes. You
It
know?
is. And you know what, man? There's something to be said for that, though. And it's something that's really important at this phase, because right now, with the economic situation that we are in as a nation, it's really important to understand that we didn't get here by accident. That encouraging people to be dependent on the state makes its fiscal decisions in a really stupid way. And the reason it makes its fiscal decisions consistently in a very stupid way is because nobody has any fucking skin in the game. It's exactly the same reason that 100% financing is not a real thing in real estate. Like, yes, if you have a relationship and experience and you have a private lender, you can get 100% financing on your fix and flips or something like that based on your track record and your relationship with that lender. But, 100% financing, like back in the day, the 2008 crash type financing, that didn't work out. Why? Because the borrowers had no skin in the game. It's the exact same reason nothing the government does works. Nobody pays personally. There's no personal price to pay when everything goes wrong and blows up in somebody's face. So, of course, when they're making decisions that are wholeheartedly funded by everybody else's extorted funds, why would they give a shit?
Oh no, now, I don't know, in your places where you still have rentals, do they get a free lawyer there for evictions?
They can in most states at this
Okay.
point in time. And that's become quite a nightmare since the pandemic as well.
Mhm.
And it's trending in that direction no matter where you live. I don't care if you could be in one of those really, really, really red states where evictions happen in a heartbeat, like Georgia, for example. That's
Mhm.
a place where evictions and foreclosures can happen rapidly if you don't pay your bills. New Hampshire is actually really similar. But the reality of the matter is, even in those places, all of those resources are readily available. And the second people get used to it and get interested in working the system, there's plenty of poor people in every state in this country. And
Mhm.
they can be motivated to support with their votes things like rent control and all kinds of other shit. And there's talk about rent control literally in more than a dozen states right now. They're actively talking about implementing rent control. And they're talking about it because of the effects of the pandemic. And the effect of the pandemic is that everything costs 1.5 times what it did pre-pandemic. So
Yeah, it's very true. My whole the whole thing with it for me is that they, just like the skin in the game thing, in Section 8, they have to pay something, right?
right,
They
right.
pay, well, if income based, if it's 10% of the rent or whatever it is.
Mhm.
And what they have, at least here, is they have zero skin in the game for the attorney stuff, so they can dispute just little bit of minutia that they can think of to delay the process and drag out everything months and months, and it
Yes.
costs them zero. If it costs them $50, they would be like, no, I don't want to waste my time on that. I don't want to waste my $50 on this stupid argument and drag it out. But it's that's been my biggest point of anger and why I don't want to be a landlord here anymore. But that's beside the point.
Well, here's the thing. I think, and for a lot of people, we're going to discover over the course of time, as we've been discovering, that there are a couple of different ways that we want to go about shifting and pivoting,
Mhm.
right? Because if we're becoming more and more of a society where our tenants can play victim and they're encouraged to believe that they are a victim,
Mhm.
because there's a local program being set up where you can go down and fill out your victim paperwork,
Mhm.
right? When that's the case, there aren't any positive results that are going to come from that. You know what I'm saying? There just aren't. There aren't any positive results that are going to come from that.
Well, for them, they see short-term positive results, right? They
Well,
might
because
get.
all they're thinking is short term.
Mhm.
Most people who live that way are going to be, doing the whole short term thinking thing. It's just the
Mhm.
nature of that population. I don't hold anything against people for being the way they are. I get it. We're not all the same, but Man, once somebody's encouraged to believe that everything is supposed to be a handout, even if it's a handout where you have a tiny little bit of skin in the game, that weakens people. It's why
Mhm.
many of these people can't take care of themselves. So their motivation comes from fear. All of the complaining, all of the rent control. The reason people are so adamant about wanting rent control is because of all the fear mongering that's being used to encourage it. Rather than, hey, well, how about you learn to increase the value that you bring to the table so that the price of rent doesn't scare you? Instead
Mhm.
of that, it's no, but there's a handout over here, and we got to make some more rules to control this and that. It makes no sense.
Well, that can go into a whole nother conversation about maybe people needing to get into the trades more, maybe because that's fairly high pay, but you have to actually work, and there's like nobody for a lot of these jobs, and
Dude,
so
10
many of
years
the
from
old.
now, the trades are going to be where it's at because, quite frankly,
Mhm.
you're not going to replace a lot of these things. You're not, I don't
Mhm.
care what anybody says right now, you're not going to have AI electricians walking around wiring new houses. That's not going to
Mhm.
happen. You're not going to have AI plumbers because anybody who's ever worked in the trades for 5 seconds knows that all tradespeople understand Murphy's Law happens. And it happens
Mhm.
every fucking day in every trade, no matter what trade you pick. Okay. So they all get that. And it takes their human experience and understanding the multiple different ways you can potentially resolve something when something goes wrong, when you don't cut that last piece of tile quite right and
Mhm.
there's no more left at the store to replace it with, or whatever situation you're running into. Some of those things require a human decision. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So we can't just automate that right out of our society.
Yeah, I
There's
totally.
not an algorithm for everything. I mean, one of the funniest things that I've seen, and I stress funny, one of the funniest things I've seen in the past 5 years, or more specifically, the past 3 years, since the whole COVID pandemic thing took over, is watching Zillow fuck up and lose a boatload of money by trying to be real estate investors. Why is that so funny? Because they wanted to claim to be at the very forefront of the industry when it comes to real estate knowledge and information
Mhm.
and being able to pinpoint values. That was one of the things they claimed they were able to do. There isn't a fucking algorithm for everything. Technology can do some things, but technology has very, very, very real limits.
Well, and have you? Now they're doing lending, right? Or they're doing like 1% down or
Watch
something like
that
that.
program turn out the exact same way, if not substantially
It's
worse.
it's
Hopefully, they
comical.
don't crack billions of dollars of losses before they cut it.
Well, if they're offering it at low rate debt, maybe there's more stuff you can buy sub to. But
Mhm.
I definitely agree with you on that. One so my question now is you've kind of recently transitioned. So you got up to right now you hold how many doors in your properties in.
Between residential and commercial, we have just over 300 right now.
Okay. And you say you're structured, you have it with partners, I assume?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And so then now you've got that rolling. Are you still acquiring in that space?
I'm acquiring some things
Okay.
still. Some things still. For
Okay.
example, when it comes to apartments, I'm still interested in building apartments. I'm still interested in converting other spaces to apartments,
Mhm.
but I'm not really interested in buying apartments right now because they're just going for ridiculous prices
What
and
do
it
you
doesn't
think
make sense.
what's your prediction for the next 12 to 24 months with that?
Well, I think a lot of commercial property, whether we're talking about the larger multifamily properties, which, I mean, let's face it, in the real estate investing space, whether we're talking right now about Burr or we're talking about short-term rentals or we're talking about the hot button apartment space that everybody got into and all this syndication stuff,
Mhm.
the reality is when these things go viral, basically, a shitload of people dive in, just like they did with crypto and countless other things, and people get hurt because they have no idea what the hell they're doing. So you'll take a market where, for example, it used to be that, an 8%, 9%, 10% cap rate was considered stable, but not overly attractive. That wasn't a high performing asset. And now in some markets that an 8, 9, 10% cap rate was considered mediocre 5 years ago, people are excited about a 5% cap rate in that same market.
Mhm.
Well, 5% cap rate when your utility costs, your insurance costs, your property taxes, and all of these other things are actively skyrocketing. I don't know about wanting that 5% cap rate. That sounds like, a rounding error could turn your cash flow into either non-existent or a negative number in an absolute heartbeat.
Or failing to lock in your debt service for
Yes.
a long period of time.
And there's a lot of that too. There's a lot of really, really risky stuff going on. So one thing that a lot of people are not aware of is we have literally over $1 trillion of balloon payments coming due inside of the next 24 months in that space.
That was
Guess what we
exactly
don't
why.
have?
That was my question. That's why the basis of
Yeah.
the question.
Guess what we don't have? We don't have fucking lenders to actually be there to refi those out. Not at prices that are going to work.
Mm-mm.
Those cash flows are all going to flip negative. So
I'm in several syndications, and it's one of the things that I'm like, okay, I hope I didn't necessarily think about it at the beginning of how long is the debt locked in for, right? And where are we at? And are they going to have to do another raise, or what are they going to have to do to try to survive? And I know there have been several that have failed or gone under. There was the famous one in Houston, right? That like 3,000 doors.
yep.
I don't know if you're seeing any more of those. That was the one that just came to the top of my mind. Like,
Well, there's a ton of that going on right now, and
Mhm.
believe it or not, I mean, there's as we all know, there's a lot of people out there right now that are doing the active doggy paddle and paddling as hard as they can to try to make it look like they're still above water. We've seen a lot of stuff go down with countless big name investors that are out there on podcasts and all this other shit advertising their units. I laugh my ass off because realistically, bro, like most of what I have for units, I have solo. I have a couple of different partners in a couple of other projects, but I'm so insanely conservative, it's ridiculous. Like I play safe, safe, safe. A lot of people that know me and that hear the way I talk and stuff like that would think I'm a risk taker, but not even close.
Mhm.
I don't do
So
risk.
your biggest building unit wise, how many is in that one?
Right now, the biggest thing I have is 128. Biggest
How
complex.
did you find it, and how did you get the deal?
I actually took that over with two partners that I
Okay.
previously had. They actually owned the property and brought me in on it.
Okay.
Brought me in on that deal when they had previously four other partners. So I replaced four partners coming into
Okay.
that.
Basically bottom out.
Yeah, well, I had just liquidated a ton of units that were not positive, a
Mhm.
ton of units that were actually regrets, including actually the aforementioned one. Believe it or not, I liquidated that property. I got a bunch of capital back at the time that I liquidated it. The one with the bunch of dogs living in the house and stuff.
Mhm.
I lost a little over 65 grand on that deal, but
Mhm.
I got a portion of my money back and put it into this one. So
Okay. And so now, when I met you, you were you were tied to the Kingdom Real Estate,
Mhm.
and I don't know if you're still working with them or not. And I know now you're doing some new stuff. I don't know if you wanted to maybe kind of tell everybody what you're up to these days and kind of where you're at.
Absolutely. So yeah, I am still actually working with the Kingdom Real Estate. I do have a good relationship with those guys. Get along with those guys very well. Met them about 5 years ago, and I do still work with them on some stuff. At the same time, myself and one of my partners actually launched our own thing because we were looking at a lot of people in the education space being structured in a really, really, really similar way, where it's basically you sign up, you get access to an online portal, you might get some books, you might get some videos, some whatever, some forms, that type of stuff, some written materials to study. And then for the most part, you're kind of left on your own, and maybe you got like a monthly team Zoom call or something that you can jump on, or in-person meetings or whatever. And we found that there's a lot of people out there, no matter which one you pick. So, and I say that to emphasize the fact that I'm not putting anybody down, because I'm not. I would never do that. But no matter which one you pick, any of the famous gurus out there, any of the famous names, real estate investing educators, you can hear a whole bunch of negative shit about them from people. You
Mhm.
hear positive shit, and then you hear a bunch of negative shit. And then there's, oh, this guy scammed me. They charged me $40,000 for education, and I didn't learn anything. And then they never gave me any of my money back or whatever. You know, I didn't want to be a part of anything like that. I didn't want to be a part of anything like that. That shit frustrated me. So we actually came up with a completely different program where first and foremost, we price things in such a way so it's a lot more accessible for most people. It does come with most of the tools that they're actually going to need. And on the support end, it really couldn't get any more ridiculous. We meet multiple times a week on Zoom. We also work together tangibly inside of their CRM. So we provide a CRM for all of our students, which is a bulletproof CRM to begin with. It's badass. And then we work with them in the CRM hand in hand and partner on deals together. And we split those deals with the students. So their overall success rate on doing things like seller finance transactions, subject to transactions, lease options, short sales, any combination thereof, on commercial, industrial, residential, I don't care what it is. What we do care about is we find our leads in the first place from something that occurs in public record. And the reason for that is we want to eliminate that luck factor. We don't want our business to be contingent upon luck. I know if I'm following a formula where I locate a specific property owner because of a problem that they're having right now, which happens to be a problem that I specialize in resolving, right? If I know that that's the reason that I'm in contact with them, I have at least some place to start. For example, when somebody's a pre-foreclosure, every single time with every pre-foreclosure, right off the bat, in order to do, as I mentioned previously, x-rays and blood work, I'm ordering a reinstatement and a payoff right off the bat.
Mm-hmm.
That way I get the information from which I can make decisions. And I explain this crystal clear to the seller. Look, we're going to diagnose this first. So before we make any decisions, we're going to figure out how much do you actually owe in total from the payoff. We're also going to find out how much is it going to cost to reinstate or restructure your loan based upon your reinstatement quote, so that we can see if this is just a straight reinstatement, or do we have to perhaps modify this or do some kind of forbearance first, you know? So that's the reason for it. Is it allows me, just like baking a cake, it allows me to follow the same recipe over and over and over again because I source the lead, right? And instead of having to depend on what type of marketing is working, well, if instead of marketing, I or members of my team are prospecting, where we are going to them, the equivalent of hunting, you know, rather than going to the store and hoping they happen to have what I would like to eat, right? I'm hunting. If I'm in the mood for deer, I go where I know there's going to be some deer, and I kill that bastard and dice it up and eat it.
Okay. So,
You know?
and then with that, so this, I'm guessing, the CRM you're using, you probably have, it's not like is it a white labeled thing, or is it something that's customized in your guys's, like your whole deal and kind of exclusive?
It's kind of a combination thereof. It's a white labeled product. Our system is based on GHL, on
Okay.
Go High Level.
Mm-hmm.
But the CRM that our students are using is the exact same one with all the same workflows and stuff like that we're using. So we have, you know, specific things that are built out for short sale deals and for subject to deals and seller carryback deals, lease options, all types of stuff like that.
Side tangent on that. I would definitely, you know, maybe talk to you offline on this. We have someone in the community here who's built an awesome AI bot for GHL specifically, but it works great on follow up and actually qualifying leads. So
Okay.
it's pretty cool. But
Phenomenal.
so with that, with your coaching program and stuff, you guys are you doing any in-person stuff too, or is it just kind of, it's all virtual?
We are going to be doing more in-person stuff. We just launched this year. We'll be doing this for quite a while. We just launched this year. We will be doing some in-person stuff, some in-person get-togethers. We do actually have a joint event that we're putting on with another. It's actually, when I mentioned earlier that I have a trusted third-party source for short sales and loan mods, we're putting on a joint event down here in Clearwater, Florida, or at least in the Clearwater, Florida area, the first week of November this year. I'll get you the information on that. We'll be finalizing all that info in the next week or so.
Okay.
So you'll have all the info if people are interested in attending that.
Okay. Awesome. And then as you kind of gone through this, you started how many months ago, or when did you guys start doing this?
Yeah, we launched it in January, right at the beginning of this year. January, I think it was January 3rd. It might have been January 5th. It was one of those two. It was either the 3rd or the 5th, I think, that we decided to launch it and went live. And we have not done any advertising at all. So we actually just did, literally in the past couple of days, we just started doing a little tiny bit of advertising. And I do mean a little tiny bit. We're spending like hundreds of dollars a year on it.
Mhm.
So it's not a major investment by any means. We've been basically just building this from sphere of influence from our
Okay.
pre-existing contacts and stuff like that. And we've actually aligned ourselves with quite a few different organizations as well, where we can add value to them. They can add value to our students. We can ally with them in a bunch of different things, you know?
Okay. So if you were talking to someone in Washington, like
Mhm.
investors here that are trying to find deals, and what do you think the low hanging fruit is right now, or where they should start their focus? Starting from zero.
Well, there are a couple of things. One thing that's very important to pay attention to right now is that there's this really strange gap, and of course, real estate's hyper local. So if we go from one place to another, things are going to change, of
Hmm.
course. But generally speaking, nationwide right now, we're in this really weird stagflation type place where property values went way, way up during the pandemic, which, that's a whole discussion in and of itself. But since that point, since the middle of last year, basically, right around June of last year, the rates have been hiking and hiking and hiking and just climbing up and up and up. And now we're at a point where the market's in just this really weird spot. And what's weird about it, first and foremost, I've never seen at any point in the entire 23 years that I've been doing this, I've never seen such low inventory on the MLS.
Hmm.
Like just nationwide, if we're talking gross number of listings that are on the market right now, there are less properties actively on the market in the United States right now than there have ever been in my career. And it
Hmm.
seems that number is only shrinking, quite frankly, to me. I mean, granted, there's a lot of scandal, there's a lot of stuff going on with relation to the real estate market. You hear a lot of stuff, especially if you're in the types of circles we're in, right?
Hmm.
Where I'm assuming, very much like myself, based upon what I know of your life, that most of the people in your life are somehow involved in real estate, um, or at least affected by it.
Yeah.
So the reality is, no matter what niche you're in, no matter what you've been doing in real estate, there have been some unique challenges. So anybody that's been buying, holding, we've got a lot of tenant issues recently because of the state of the economy, because a lot of people in the more dependent W-2 type lifestyle, if they've got a fixed income or a limited income, trying to deal with the price of things right now might not be that pleasant.
Hmm.
Things have been pretty inflated for a while. That, unfortunately, that trickles up to us. You know what I mean? If you
Hmm.
own a bunch of units that people are renting from you and they can't afford to pay their rent, there will eventually be a day where you can't afford to pay your underlying debts on the property either. You know,
Hmm.
that's just a basic concept. Of course, that's going to vary, but so what I have been seeing a lot of in terms of trying to get this activity, we want to always stay on top of anything that's expired and older stuff that's expired. Um, I think it's very important to go after the ones that are the most helpable. And I know that's probably not a real word, but
I get it.
the ones who have the most problems, like that we can become aware of. So what I suggest doing in non-disclosure states and in states where there's any type of prohibition in terms of reaching out to somebody because specifically they are in pre-foreclosure, there are some common things that typically go along with pre-foreclosure that do not prohibit you from reaching out. So, divorce, very common one. If somebody happens to be married and they fall into pre-foreclosure and receive a lis pendens, there's a very high likelihood that either A, they're already in a divorce at the same time as the foreclosure, or B, they're about to be. So oftentimes, if you look at people that are in a divorce, if they've recently filed for divorce, which is accessible in most states through like PropStream and things like that, right? These types of technologies. Divorce is something you can spot very frequently. Code violations, any type of code violations, whether it's health code violations, building code violations, sanitary code violations, any of that type of stuff. Non-permitted work. Oftentimes you'll find people that are doing non-permitted work. It's because they literally can't afford to actually pay a professional to do it the right way. So
Hmm.
they'll cut corners, do non-permitted work, end up in trouble for it. And the trouble that they get in for it will force them into pre-foreclosure if they weren't already there. The probate situation, it's another one. People die, whether they die of COVID or anything that was given to them to stop COVID or any other damn reason that they could possibly end up dying. The fact of the matter is, in a country with roughly 350 million people, about 1 million people die every year, even on a good year when nothing particular is going wrong, right? when people pass away, if they had a mortgage, their property is heading toward pre-foreclosure at that point. That's all there is to it. So the family members will have an opportunity to resolve it. So that's what I would say, honestly. And the biggest reason I'm going to say that is this. No matter what type of pre-foreclosures we're going after at any given time, the number one challenge with pre-foreclosure properties has nothing to do with learning the strategies at all. You can learn sub 2, and I don't say this to pick on Pace Morby or anything else like that, but you could learn sub 2 soup to nuts, literally, in a weekend. If you sat down classroom style with your materials, studied it, and filled out contracts over and over and over again in a couple of days of actual practice or that relevant amount of time, you could be really good at filling out that paperwork, and you can understand the concept because it's basic. It's basic. You know what's not basic? When somebody hasn't paid their mortgage in 2.5 years and concurrently they have no income and they have no tangible assets that you can actually demonstrate, maybe a couple $100 under the mattress, which doesn't really count. Trying to find a new place for them to live, that's 100 times harder than any short sale will ever be. It's 100 times harder than any sub 2 or fancy seller financing technique or creative deal structure will ever be. Because in this day and age, you're definitely not buying anything unless you're literally paying with actual physical cash. You're not buying anything without your credit getting involved. If you're 2.5 years behind on your mortgage, your credit score is like 11. You know what I mean? That's kind of where you're headed. And yes, I'm aware that it doesn't quite go down to 11, but you'll basically be trying to stretch the lower parameters of what's possible for a credit score by that point.
Absolutely.
Most people don't know this, but you miss a mortgage payment, one mortgage payment, you could have an 800 credit score. You miss one mortgage payment, you were in the extremely low 7s at best. One more mid 6s. I mean, it's that bad. One mortgage payment could literally cost you 150 points on your credit report just by missing one.
Yep. And usually it's not just one. It's usually they have like 5 things go bad at the same time, right?
Exactly.
Boom,
and
there it goes.
And it has a super negative compounding effect to it to begin with. But on top of that, it's not just the credit score. And this is something people sometimes don't think about. Like in relation to pre-foreclosures in these past couple of years, there's been so many people running their mouths and talking about, oh, it's not going to be anything like 2007, 2008. That's not going to happen because we have Dodd-Frank now, and Dodd-Frank's going to save the whole fucking world.
Thank Barney Frank.
No, not quite exactly what's happening. Here's the reality. Even if it's true what people say, yes, property values are at an all-time high, or at least they were at an all-time high, and they're still fairly close to it, right? Even if that's the case, you sell the property, you liquidate that asset, walk away with your equity. What are you buying next with your 317 credit score? Nothing.
Or what are you renting?
Rent.
What are you renting?
Exactly. Same deal. Anywhere that you're going to rent this day and age. Ryan, I would almost, not quite, but I would almost be willing to say maybe another 2-3 years, it's going to be impossible to even find one of those mom and pop landlords that don't do credit checks. There's probably a dozen of them left in the whole fucking country at this point, if we're being honest. Absolutely. Like that doesn't exist. 10 to 15 years ago, between 2008 and 2013, when the highest volume of short sales were being done. During that time, I owned brokerages. I worked with other brokerages and handled their short sales. I was doing amazing volumes of short sales. It was ridiculous. There were times where we were taking in 115, 120 files in a month. So that being the case, it's not that different, in all honesty. Back then, I could tell these people, hey, when you need to get a new roof over your head, here's what we're going to have to do. We're going to have to go driving for dollars, basically, looking for those handmade signs of those self-managing landlords that are in their 60s and 70s and aren't going to run a credit report, and they're not going to ask for pay stubs and all that other stuff, because otherwise you're not getting a new apartment. This is going to depend on your ability to smile and deliver a nice firm handshake and all that other old-fashioned shit so that you can bond with this private landlord who's not going to put you through the ringer. All right. That used to be my parting advice when somebody sold their property via short sale. I'm finding that almost doesn't exist anymore. And I'm finding that third party from the feedback that modern sellers that I'm actively working with right now are coming back and telling me. They're literally going, hey, Grandpa, listen, I know back in 2008 when you told people to go look for a private landlord that doesn't do credit checks, that probably worked. But now they have this thing called the internet and social media and all this other shit.
Mm-hmm.
And even if somebody is a great grandma at this point in time, they've got some kind of a third party verification service that they're paying for on a monthly basis to handle their tenants. Even the smallest, most naive landlords, the fucking Amish are using them at this point in time. Okay.
Well, were you ever someone that gave people chances and like listened to their stories, and maybe someone wasn't as good as you would hope they would be, but you're like, you know what, I'm going to give this guy a chance? I was like that all the time. I came from credit and loans and bad credit car loans and bankruptcies and everything like that. And you're always looking for that diamond, the person who had their shit together. Then maybe something bad happened, and then now, okay, cool. They have the potential to be great. But the same thing you started on in the beginning of the conversation that we're seeing is because of the overreach of the government with requiring in some areas here, the very first applicant who meets your minimum qualifications, you're required to accept. The overreach, right? Uh-oh. And now are you good with your audio?
Huh?
There was like a playback there. I just want to make sure your audio good.
Yeah, well, I opened up my phone, and unfortunately, I opened up my home screen, and it was already on Facebook because I was looking up your page, so it brought it up, and I was like, "Oh, I'm playing it back in the speakers."
Oh God, do that. Well, I was saying, so that's what we're seeing is now with how long it takes. It used to be 45 days and $1,000 for an eviction. Now it's 6 months and $7,000 and no flat fee eviction. Now it's the requiring in some areas that you take a payment plan if they don't have their deposit. If they don't have a deposit, you have to take a payment plan here. And like things like that. There's just no incentive to give anyone a chance.
Well, so, here's the thing. It's charity when it's done voluntarily. But when it's forced on you by some kind of a mandatory regulation or rule or something that you're being forced to follow, that's being, tossed down at you from the powers that shouldn't be, it's a lot harder to accept it. It's a lot harder to accept it because you're like, this doesn't make sense. I'm doing this because somebody arbitrarily made a decision that this is what I have to do. And that person, yet again, had no fucking skin in the game. So when their decision, not if, but when their decision has massive negative unintended consequences, they're not going to personally pay for it. So they don't actually care how bad they fuck up. But
it sounds good for people that are down on their luck and they want to vote. But anyways,
well, I mean,
there for a long time.
Part of the reason that we wanted to put this together, the group that we have at this point in time, IPA for REI, I believe Rick probably would put some kind of a link or something in the comments.
Oh, sure.
There is one of the reasons that we started this is we noticed, number one, that lots of people still, from all the negative shit people were talking back in 2008 and thereafter about short sales, it looks like still there's not much info about them out there. All right. Still to this day, from the beginning of my career, I can say right now, all the way back to the very beginning of my career, more than 50% of the people who fall into pre-foreclosure, who have a lis pendens issued against them, ultimately still end up getting foreclosed on. And it's a combination of them being, they're hiding from attention. They don't want to talk to the investors, the agents, the bankruptcy attorneys, the mortgage brokers, or anybody else that's offering them a solution. And at the same time, it's, we've got people that are being restricted. Like, the state is protecting somebody's feelings. So they make a rule that says you can't contact people that are in pre-foreclosure and offer them solutions because they have to feel bad for a minute about being behind on their bills. And it's not okay to hurt people's feelings. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to prohibit you from helping them by making a rule that says you can't reach out to them. So now they're guaranteed to get foreclosed on. Wonderful. What is this? A race to see how many fucking homeless people we can have? It seems like it.
Seattle.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah, for sure. Well,
maybe
yeah,
that is the goal. They don't want tent cities or something. I don't know. Because
I
then they could be paid $65 million to clear up the tent city.
oh
See,
my
we uncovered the actual plan.
god. You know what they did? They had the Major League Baseball All-Star game in Seattle this year, right? And they spent a bunch of time clearing out all the, homeless people in the tents and the motorhomes and all the stuff, right? And so Seattle just looked beautiful for about a week. And then, it's
Good God.
now that that's gone, I think they did the same thing when they had the Olympics in Rio or something like that. Like, I just remember them, they're like, oh, we're gonna make it pretty, and then we'll go back to normal.
Unreal. Unreal.
But
Yeah, it's very,
uh,
very common. Things are all about it's all about appearances. But yeah, I
right.
mean, dude, we noticed a couple of things. We had noticed that there was no decent education for short sales out there that remains relevant. There's a bunch of
Mhm,
crap back from the 2008 timeframe. There's the courses that NAR puts out
mhm,
and stuff like that the realtors have to go through. And a lot of those don't actually teach you anything other than complying with whatever the rule happens to be at that particular time. It doesn't teach you how to successfully close them or, how to get more of them or how to make them more
mhm,
profitable or anything like that. It just teaches you how to follow the rules a little bit better because
mhm,
life is all about obedience around here. Um, but then we also have on the flip side of that coin, because there's two different worlds really when it comes to pre-foreclosure. You've got the creative side, the sub two side, where you want to try to focus primarily on cash flow.
mhm,
And the sub two side of real estate investing education in this day and age has become such a muddied mess. It's a muddied mess. Got people out there trying to buy property subject to that should not be bought subject to. People don't realize people have short memories. People have short
mhm,
memories. If you're buying something that's not properly motivated subject to, you got to understand in a lot of states and in a lot of localities, that person is still going to be treated like the owner if they have to go to court against you.
mhm,
The fact that they bought it by qualifying with their own financials and that there could be a circumstance where they've made more mortgage payments on that mortgage than you have. There could be a circumstance where something you said or something you marketed could be portrayed as, misleading.
mhm,
There's all kinds of different circumstances under which such things are heavily regulated. So it's very important to understand them. So we saw an opportunity for two things. Number one, get short sales out there again, so that people can be reminded that that exists because there's a ton of pre-foreclosures coming. There's a ton of them actively going right now, and the numbers are only growing every single month.
mhm.
But on top of that, we also have the sub two side of the deal where I've seen such muddied down garbage with it, where it's this weird in the real estate investing world. People make up these new things where they call it like, we're not doing wholesaling anymore. Now it's donkey flipping or
Astro
fucking,
flipping or
yeah,
whatever. Yeah.
whatever
Right.
bullshit name they want to make up and reassign something. And I'm not insulting anybody who's involved with any given one of those things. I get that they have their tactics, but um, when things are packaged to people and the marketers are selling something to somebody and they're focusing on the you don't need to actually learn this shit. Dude, subject to is much different. Short sales as well. Short sales are risky. If you fuck up a short sale, you can actually ruin somebody's life. You
Mhm,
could cause somebody some serious financial or legal harm by mistakes that you make by taking on something you don't understand. Sub two the exact same way. I mean, especially if you're going to sub two somebody's house who's not even behind on it yet, that's a problem. You know what I mean? If you happen to miss a payment, if you
okay.
get somebody who's got pristine credit and then you turn around and trash their credit, that's a problem. Here's another thing that I see a lot of, and this one pisses people off when I say it if they've learned that method, but assigning subject to deals.
Yeah, I hate that. Yeah.
Dude, you sit down, look a seller in the eye face to face, establish a relationship with this seller, explain to them how the transaction's going to work. They trusted you to make that payment. They didn't trust some fucking third party that you found on an obscure Facebook group. You know
Mhm,
what I mean? They didn't meet that person. They don't know that person. They don't know if that person knows the same things that you said. They don't know if
mhm,
that person has the same intentions that you stated you have. And you're potentially gambling with somebody's credit, you know? Now, there are a lot of different ways to structure creative transactions so that you can still do it in a way where it's safer for the sellers. And giving full credit where it's due, most of these educators, if they're given time to fully and properly explain what they intend to do, they can do that. But when you have thousands and thousands and thousands of people who don't even actually have the education. They're bragging about they're going to partner with somebody who has the education. Do I have a problem with that? Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Why? Because as a real estate educator myself, I can tell you this much. The education products, the education communities, many people who show up and are technically a student and have paid their dues, like as in they put their credit card down and paid for the course, still haven't even opened it. They haven't even watched a video yet.
Mm-hmm.
There's also a massive handful of them that are being instructed, partner up with a student, find a student, squad up. Oh my God, if I hear that term.
I almost said it, but I was like, oh, that's
One of
too,
my least
you'll know
favorite
who that is.
terms. It's just, how can we make a bunch of grown-ass real estate investors sound like fucking adolescent morons?
You wrestle gators.
Unreal. Yeah, it's just, it makes, here's the thing. When you make something too accessible and you got a whole bunch of people who have no skin in the game, they're not students, they haven't signed up, they haven't studied it, they've never done a real estate deal. Like I get this shit from people every once in a while when I even mention sub 2, where somebody's like, oh, have you ever heard of Pace Morby? And I'm like, not really, but I definitely closed my first subject 2 transaction a dozen years before he did. So I know that there was that. I'm not picking on the guy. He's a great guy. He is. I think he's a wonderful guy. I think a lot of people in the community, though, and I would say the same thing about most of the other big educators out there. I think he's a wonderful guy. I think most of them are wonderful guys. They have a lot of people that follow them, much like people that follow any given rock band or any given politician or actor or any other figurehead, right? That follow them, that in some weird quasi-religious way almost kind of worship them or something like that, associate them with, hey, I've seen this person's name tied to this so many times. This is the guy who does this. And the reality is, you know, all of this shit, short sales, subject 2 deals, wholesaling, fix and flipping, this stuff's all been around for decades and decades and decades. It's all been around as long as real estate transactions have been recorded. You know what I mean? Like these things have been around forever. Varieties of them have been around forever. But you get these people in this day and age of the internet where people get to become celebrities. You get these Jake Pauls of real estate that come out and become famous because they have this massive mouth and they put themselves out there. You know this. I don't use my social media to brag about what I do for a living. I use my social media as a fucking litter box so I can shit all over politicians all the time. But I'm not out there marketing what I'm doing constantly on social media. You don't even hear me talk about real estate on social media. And there's a reason for it, because I don't want to have a fake ass shallow relationship with a bunch of people. I don't want that. You know, we partner with our actual students. We don't tell them, hey, you can partner with the student to do it. You fucking come partner with me directly. So I directly have both a benefit and a consequence of whether or not you successfully do these things. You know what I mean? So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, that I think you summed all that in a nutshell. I have a serious question though.
Yeah.
How many cats right now?
9.
9.
Yeah. I love.
Would you ever rent to someone with 9 cats?
Oh, hell no. I wouldn't rent to somebody who fits my description in any fucking way. That would be terrible. And you know what? I don't. But that's another part of the reason I'm candid about it. I can be very honest about it. I'm not for everybody. You know what I mean? I'm not everybody's cup of tea, and I get that. And I'm fucking fine with that. That's perfectly cool. So I don't put myself out there that much. I'm not going to cut my hair so people can like me better. I'm not going to shave clean so people can like me better. I'm not going to clean up my language at any point in time. I'm going to be me 24/7 until the day I die.
Absolutely.
And that's what I'm going to do.
I love it. Well, let's do this, William. I definitely want to catch up with you more. It's been way too long since I've chatted with you, but
Likewise.
I definitely I'm going to get the links from Rick and put them in the comments so they're there. And people will be able to reach out. I definitely I want to see your stuff do well. I think it will, just because you're involved with it. But you're a wealth of information, and
appreciate you, brother.
I definitely like where you're coming from with it. You've always been very genuine and very open with everything, and not really having much of a filter. I kind of appreciate.
I appreciate that, man. Look, it's the only thing I know how to do. Here's the thing: if I ever clean it up and then somebody sees me elsewhere, right?
If I see you in a suit, I swear my picture of you on my phone. I think it's from sometime you had it on social media or something, and it's like you clean cut with like I think a suit on maybe or something like that. And I'm just like, that's not the same guy. Like that's not the
No,
same.
that was a long time ago. Like I said,
Mhm.
when I first got into this business, I was one of those people that I didn't know there was actually a difference between real estate agent and real estate investor. I thought real estate agent, title agent, mortgage broker, real estate investor, and developer were all just
Mhm.
the
Same
same
deal.
thing, really. I didn't
Yeah.
understand the difference. I mean, I was 17,
Mhm.
So
Awesome. Well, I'm gonna go ahead. I'm gonna kick off the live, and I definitely appreciate you being here. We'll put the link on there. There, that's off. I'm gonna go ahead and hit pause on here, and then go okay, and stop session. Boom. There. Now it's no longer um,
beautiful.
it's no longer recording, and or it still is recording. Motherfucker. All right. Stop.